Hugo Robin ya está de regreso y ahora más saludable que nunca. Continuamos.
Okay, guys, we're back from the pause, and like I said, and the segment before this is we're having online. We're interviewing today the one and only, the wonderful Marianne Williamson. She's an author of several books. Her new book is entitled Tears to Triumph, which is an excellent book, by the way. I highly recommend it because it's very soul-opening. Not so much as just eye-opening, it's very much soul-opening because it gives a lot of points to consider and reflect upon what we observe as humanity and what we can do about it. A lot of the prayers that come in the book are really right in the money. I mean, she nails it with those prayers. I don't know if they're theirs. They could be probably from A Course in Miracles. I have listened to A Course in Miracles, but in Spanish, so I'm not quite sure about it. But anyway, the thing is that it works, and I highly recommend it. And she's a bestseller author. Her books have reached millions of people around the world. In some circles, she is highly known. In others, like here in our Hugo Robin radio or all around Mexico, I have asked several of my friends if they know her, and they give me a no. So I think today is going to be a lot of insights are going to be proven wonderful because, at least for me, she has been, wow, she has given me a boost to my life. And that's the reason that we're having her right now on the show. So only a couple of seconds more so we can establish communication. Just to let you know, I have some write-ins here over that inspire me a lot of the book. And one of those inspiring things that I heard is I went to a conference to see her in San Diego a couple of days ago. And she said something that really stunned me because she said that in our day and age, everyone is being classified as clinically depressed, and we all know, or we have heard, the majority of us, that what that means. That means that you need to be on medication according to medicine and allopathic doctors. So one of the things that stunned me was that she mentioned that it's not that you're depressed, it's that you're in your 20s. I mean, come on, guys. Being in your 20s is very, very difficult time in life because you come from being and being protected, being in a circle of love, optimally by being in your family, and you come as being a student only. And when you finish your career, then you suddenly realize that you have to take action and that you have to make a living in the world, and that you need to have discipline and so much stuff. And you get mesmerized by what you see and what you feel, and then suddenly you cannot deal with some stuff, and you go to the doctor because they think there's something wrong with you. You cannot deal with life, and suddenly you're classified as depressed, and here, take this medicine. And that's just life, guys, and it doesn't mean that you have to suffer because of it. So we have Marianne Williamson online. Hello, Marianne, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Well, I'm doing super fine. First of all, once again, sorry about the confusion about the time.
Oh, that's all right. We're finally here. We finally got it.
And thank you for giving us your time. I was just telling people that I asked several of my friends if they knew you before the interview, and they say they didn't, so they're in for a bliss. And I just want to mention to you and to all of our listeners that how it was that I came to know about you. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
You know, back in 2005, a movie came out which is called Coach Carter.
Uh-huh.
And in that movie, which is phenomenal for me because it gives a lot of insights about life, there was a point where the coach tries to push someone who is losing it in life. And he always kept asking his student, what is your deepest fear, young man? What is your deepest fear? And at one point in the movie, this guy see his cousins kill. He goes through the coach home and cries to take him back. and he opens his arm into his house, and he goes back. And when a critical point in the movie gets into where they want to open back the school gym so let the kids play, he stands up and recites one of the most beautiful words I have ever heard in my life. And they so impacted me that I went over to the internet. I'm talking about 2005 to learn about those words, who was the author, to learn about that. And back then, the internet gave a lot of information about those words returning to be from Nelson Mandela. And few people in the world today give credit to where credit is due. So after some digging out, I found out that those words were from you, and that's where I came to learn and buy some of your books and learn about your material. And that's one of the most wonderful things that I have ever heard in my life, that our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, is that we are powerful beyond measure.
Yes, that line, and of course that whole paragraph, is based on the principles in A Course in Miracles. The paragraph is from my book, A Return to Love, and that's what A Return to Love is. It's a reflection, my reflections on that particular book. So I've been very moved by how popular that paragraph has been. But the principle, the idea itself, that we're most powerful, not of our darkness, but of our light, is from the Course in Miracles itself. So, I always feel if people like the paragraph, they'd love the book. So I hope that, I understand people's enthusiasm for the principle, but actually it's just many of the principles in A Course in Miracles that are similarly mind-boggling.
Well, when we talk about principle and being like fundamental, we always give it like only a little bit of importance because you need to work on it and do a lot of stuff. But to someone that cannot see what other people see is like huge.
Is that a question?
Well, it's just a declaration, so you can share what your thoughts about it.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I think all of us, when we first encounter spiritual realities for the first time, are amazed. And I felt the same kind of amazement, and I still do when I read The Course in Miracles and when I read other books that introduced me to a more expanded vision of the world. I remember many years ago reading a book by Jane Roberts called The Nature of Personal Reality. And the world in which we live is based on a worldview that is so completely different than a worldview, a spiritual worldview. A spiritual worldview is a path of the heart where love becomes your filter. The idea that you are a being of love and that your purpose on this earth is to love, becoming the primary sense of your identification and your purpose. And when you have that mental filter, it changes everything. It changes your sense of who you are. It changes your sense of why you're here. You're not just a body. You're not separate from other people. You're not limited. You're not mortal. But the world tells us the opposite of that. The world tells us that we are limited and we are bodies and we are our mortal circumstances and that we are limited in many, many ways. So it is both amazing and daunting to realize that we're not who and what the world told us that we are something completely different. And then the entire purpose of our lives on any given day becomes closing the gap between the false image that the world has taught us and would lure us into every single day and the truth of our hearts. And it's a moment-by-moment effort. It's a moment-by-moment challenge. It's a moment-by-moment invitation to live life from a higher place. And that higher place is the only place where we can find inner peace, and it's the only place where we can find happiness. But the gravity, just like physical gravity pulls you down, emotional and psychological gravity pulls us down in the form of constant temptation to judge and to attack and to defend and to blind ourselves, not only to our own reality, but to the reality of other people as well. And that causes all kinds of despair and pain. And it is our constant journey from that region, that mental region of pain and chaos. Our journey out of that is the journey of being alive.
You know, I just read your book, your latest one, Tears to Triumph. I have to say it's amazing the way that you take us through different viewpoints that we probably never see in our lives. And I have to say that Tears to Triumph is the title of the book. I could easily change it to be called Tears of Triumph.
Oh, yes, that's interesting. Well, calling it Tears of Triumph, I mean, that's why it's called Tears to Triumph rather than From Tears to Triumph, because those tears become a necessary and intricate part of our triumphs, don't they? Sometimes what we see while we are in our tears, you know, it's just like in the night sky, you see the stars more clearly. Sometimes the things we see during the night, during the time of our pain, are the things we most need to see, and that includes our own mistakes and our need to have mercy on other people for the mistakes that they made.
Exactly.
We sometimes act like we're afraid of tears, you know, we're afraid of the sad times, and sometimes the sad times are the richest times if we learn the lessons that they bring with them.
Exactly. You said something in your book that you didn't want it to be numb, that is to be medicated, because you wanted to see what you can gain of that situation.
Yes, I've always had a feeling that psychic pain, psychological and emotional pain, is as important as physical pain in that it conveys information. You know, if you have a broken leg, it's important that you feel pain. It's your brain's, it's the functionality of the body that you feel pain, because otherwise you wouldn't know that you need to reset that bone. You can't just take morphine, you have to reset the bone. Well, the same is true with psychological pain. We can't just numb ourselves to it. We have to reset the thinking that either caused the pain or is keeping the pain in place.
In other words, listen to the announcement the body gives us so we can apply or make a change.
Yes, absolutely, because when we are seeing things correctly, things don't hurt us. Now, that's not, you know, all of that is much easier said than done, but definitely. But the point is that it is in coming to forgive ourselves and others, and it is in coming to have faith in miraculous possibilities for new beginnings. It is our learning to have faith in a life that is eternal, that we do come to have peace. And there is no other peace besides that. And that's really the purpose of the book. You know, there is a circle of light or understanding. And that is the light of a reality that dwells and exists beyond what the physical eyes can see. And when we are in the light of that understanding, and when we allow the light of that understanding to guide our perceptions of our own reality and our relationship to other people, then we can know peace. And that peace in Buddhism is called nirvana, or enlightenment. And in the Old Testament, in the story of the Exodus, that's the promised land. And in the story of Jesus, that's the resurrection, the lifting of the mind to the realization that only the level of love or spirit is real. But when we are outside that light, we are cast into outer regions of chaos and randomness and despair. And then in those outer regions of chaos and randomness and despair, we are led to believe by the same mind that casts us into those regions that if we fiddle with the outside things, if we make the material world different, then we will find peace But that's not where we find peace, because the more we fiddle with those outer regions, the more they become a kind of prison. And that's why a journey home, a journey back to the realization that love is all that matters, is the only salve for that pain and that essential spiritual woundedness.
You know, and you pointed out something in your book which is also stunned me, because we resist suffering and we don't embrace it as part of life. And you said something about if you need to cry 45 tears and so far you cried 17, you still need to cry more.
Well, that's right. You know, we have to realize that if your body is bruised, then we understand that you're going to have to be gentle with your body while your bruises heal. Well, grief and the tears that we cry while we're grieving are the psychic immune system, just like the body has an immune system. And just as when you might have been beaten up or in a car accident or something physically, it's going to take time. Then it's the same emotionally, and during that time you cry. But tears have a function. You know, we're all so convinced that the body is a genius. Why would we not assume that the number of tears we cry is just part of our genius? It's part of the body's genius. It is literally a way that we cry some things out. So suppressing our tears is a way to try to short circuit the grieving process. And we all go around acting like, let's be happy, even when we're not. And this desensitizes us to our suffering. And part of the problem of desensitizing ourselves to our own suffering is that then we too often desensitize ourselves to the suffering of others. And that is not a good thing. And much suffering in the world happens because of that, because we don't stop to think about how our behavior is affecting other people.
Exactly. You know, in your conference in San Diego, once again, I said it stuns me because it could be a very thin line to see things that other people manage to see. And in today's world, we are clinically called depressed, and we are orientated to take pharmaceuticals. And you said, if you're depressed, you probably are not depressed. You're simply in your 20s, because the 20s is a very difficult time in life to live.
Well, no matter how old we are, there are turbulent times. There are turbulent waters. And if you don't learn to navigate the turbulent waters of life, you don't learn to navigate life. And the 20s is a decade that is often, and probably for most people, a turbulent time. But it's not a mental illness.
I know.
And that's why the overprescription of antidepressant drugs is so dysfunctional. There is a spectrum of normal human despair. Going through your 20s or any tough time is an example of that. A bitter breakup or divorce, or the loss of a job or a professional opportunity, or loss of money, or the loss of a loved one to death. These are very painful times, very painful experiences, but they're not a mental illness. And what has happened is that the psychotherapeutic pharmacological industry has labeled these things disorders, a depressive disorder, an anxiety disorder, when really the only disorder is calling any season of life a disorder. Winter is not a disorder. It's cold, but it's a necessary part of nature's rhythms. So it would be like trying to rush winter. You can't rush winter. Nature won't have it. And the same with our lives. And the Food and Drug Administration has issued a black box warning that for people 25 years old and younger, antidepressants actually increase rather than decrease suicidal ideation. And there are people these days giving their children antidepressants, their children anti-anxiety drugs. This is it's more than dysfunctional. It's terrible. I mean, I think it's actually a form of child abuse when you look at ways things like our foster care system is giving these drugs to children.
Exactly. I think that at the end of the book, and what I catch from your conference is you quote it as saying As there is mastery in learning how to play the piano or perform any skill, there is mastery in learning how to live life as well.
Absolutely, and that's what the great religious and spiritual masters are. Whether it's a Jesus or a Buddha or any other, they are people who have lived on the earth who have achieved a state that is potential in the vast majority of us. It's the state in which we have risen to the version of ourselves that is the truth of who we are, our love, our compassion, our righteousness, our impeccability, our ethics. But and just as, like you said, if I'm painting and a great painter wants to show me how to paint, why would I resist that tutelage?
And change it for our own, right?
Right, exactly. The ego mind, the spirit of fear that dominates the planet, and it bombards all of us every day, every single day of our lives. We are constantly being barraged with thoughts and attitudes and data and stimulus that is contrary to who we are. It is contrary to our spiritual reality.
Well, Marianne, I want to thank you for having us, for allowing us to have you on our program. Like I said, your books have boosted my life. Right now, your latest book, which I'm holding in my hand so the camera can see, is called Tears to Triumph. People can get it all over the world. There's even a version coming in Spanish.
Yes, there is in the spring, yes.
Yeah, and they can get your book easily throughout the U.S. or around the world in Amazon.com and in whatever country they have it. And here in Mexico, like I said, Gandhi Libraries owns basically the Mexican market, and most of your books are in Spanish. Your latest one is in ebook, and according to you, it's coming in Spanish. So I highly recommend people to get your book.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Marianne, and I'll send you an email giving you details so you can access and use however you want this interview. And
thank you very, very much.
Hopefully, we'll be in contact. And
okay, darling, I hope so. Much love to you.
You too. Bye, Marianne.
Bye.
Okay, guys, we're going to go to a brief pause and return after a few minutes.
No, este no es el fin, solo una breve pausa y regresamos con más en hugorobinradio.com.